Welcome to day 28 of your 30-day Dental MBA, Analyzing Managerial Decisions. What are decisions? Decisions are well-informed choices considering all available data for all aspects of a problem. Are you having a lucky outcome, which may occur despite the approach, but is less likely to reoccur, and it's very inconsistent? A lot of millionaires got lucky. You always know which millionaires got lucky because it wasn't from high-quality decision-making, it was luck. You know, by 1980, the average athlete, professional athlete, whatever money he made for however many years he made, say he made $1 million a year for 4 years, for the number of years he made it, that's how long it would take for him to lose it all. The first three gosh darn lottery winners that won over 10 million had it all gone in 2 years. These are lucky people. You know, they were born with a skill. They were a phenomenal athlete, but it doesn't matter how big your bicep is when you're making financial decisions, business decisions. So you need to start deciding what is a lucky outcome, what is a high quality decision. Your thinker is your most important thing. I mean, if you had to pick between losing your foot or losing your brain, which would you pick? Would you rather lose your hand or your brain? Would you rather lose your eyesight or your smell? Would you rather lose your hearing or your taste? Think about your brain. It's the most important thing. And let's think about how our brain makes decisions. The 5 sources of difficulty in decision making are the complexity, the inherent uncertainty, multiple objectives, different perspectives. We talk about perspectives. Are you a shareholder? Are you the government? Are you the employee? Are you the customers? Who are you? Everybody has a different perspective, or slight changes in inputs may lead to different choices. What makes decisions hard? The decision analysis requires personal, subjective judgments. Remember, after we look at the complexity, the inherent uncertainty, the multiple objectives, all the different perspectives, slight change in inputs leading to different choices, it's going to come down to we're going to have to make a judgment. Now, a requisite decision is the easiest decision if you have a proper decision-making model. A requisite decision model is when the model contains everything that is essential for solving the problems. There are no uncertainties, and when new intuitions or energy about the problem from which the decision maker can take action. You know, it's a lot easier to decide whether or not I should drill an oil well if I already know if there's oil down there. If you say, well, there's no oil down there, I'm probably not going to drill. Now, when I'm deciding to drill for oil, this is a risky decision. It is not a requisite decision. I do not know if there's oil down there. Sometimes when you're making a decision, you have to stop and ask yourself, what if we make the decision today? Is there any data coming in where if we waited 30 or 60 or 90 days, we'd have another piece of information that would take this from a risky decision to a requisite decision? You should aim for requisite decisions. What are the 4 phases of creativity, or what I call PIV? You need to prepare yourself. It's preparation, incubation, illumination, verification. What does that mean? Preparation. You got to prepare for the decision. You have to draw this out. Okay? How do you prepare? Prepare for it. You can have the new Delphi method where you analyze experts in the field. When I went to decide how much I should price this 30-day dental MBA, I didn't ask my 4 boys. You know, what are they going to say? One would say, do it for 2 tacos. One would do it for a cat. I asked people in the field. That's a new Delphi method. Surveying experts. Same thing when I had decision making about implants. I mean, I asked Ken Judy, I asked Carl Misch, I asked Gordon Christian. I mean, survey the experts. If you're having sensitivity with composites or bonding on all porcelain crowns, I went through LVI with Dickerson, Hornbrook, and Rosenthal. I studied Ross Nash. I went to the experts. And then what you need to do is you need to incubate it. This is a problem people don't do enough. You need to, as you're preparing for the study and you get ready to make a decision, you have to ask yourself, what about the incubation stage? For instance, I see dentists that are, they're wrapping up their last patient of the day, and you're in there with them or whatever, and you're saying afterwards you're going to go do this or that, or go to a Suns game or whatever, and the doctor walks back, and there's an envelope. It says, this is for Henry. And he says, what's this? And he opens it up, and it's a letter from one of his staff members. And the staff member says, dear doctor, I have been working here for 2 years, and I really think I'm determined a $1 an hour raise, and I really want a $1 an hour raise, and yada, yada, yada. And I need to know if you're going to give me a raise within a week because an opportunity's come up, and I want to stay here, but I want another $1. And the doctor, what does he do? I mean, just doesn't think about it, doesn't do anything, walks over and says, Sandy, come here. Hell yeah, I'll give you another $1. Come on, give me a hug. You're doing great. You're kicking butt, yada, yada, yada. If you would have taken that home and incubated it for, she said she had to know by Friday. Okay, well, this is Monday. You had 5 days you could have incubated on this. You could have walked right back up here and said, Sandy, I love that letter. And I want to give you an answer right now. And I think you know what the answer is, obviously, but, you know, I watched his 30-day Dental MBA, and I'm supposed to incubate. I'm decided that I'm not going to wait till the last minute, but I'm going to give you a letter back, just like you gave me a letter, and I'll give it to you Wednesday. And then you're home, you're talking with your wife, you're sleeping on it, you're driving back to work the next morning. You know, you'll go through all the stages. You know, first maybe denial, then anger, then acceptance or whatever. But what you might think is that, well, you know what? I want her. I'll give her another $1. But you know what really hacks me off? When we have a team huddle in the morning, she misses half of them. And you'll be saying, you know what really hacks me off is whenever she runs her, she's responsible for 10 of the 40 reports that SoftDent runs. You know what? She never gets them to me on time. And you might go back and say, yeah, I'm going to give you $1, but let's negotiate. Sandy, I'm going to give you your $1 raise, okay? You're doing good. I want you to stay here on my team. But you know what? I want you to sign a deal that says, I will make 99% of the team huddles for the upcoming year. I want you to commit that when I say that these reports need to be run, I want them run, I want them put in a folder, and I want them on this desk drawer, and you give this some thought. Why is there so many rush decisions? It's because people don't think quantitatively about how to make decisions. So preparation, then incubation, then illumination. Try to get a vision. Try to sit there and try to illuminate. What does this mean? Once we go back and do this, how will that change everything? If I give her a $1 raise, is this going to make me have to give a $1 raise to everybody? Try to think out whenever you alter a button, what is the consequence of this? And then verification. Now, when we do the decision, what are we going to write down? What are we going to measure? What are we going to manage? When we're trying to make decisions, we also have framing and perceptual blocks. We have stereotyping. How many ignorant people do they think that, all Irish are drunks? Oh, all Russians are communists. All hygienists are Nazis. All dental assistants are stupid. All receptionists can't collect money. All dentists are dumb. You know, stereotyping is the second, nationalism is the highest form of ignorance, and that's a form of stereotyping. Thinking all Japanese are this, and all Mexicans are this, or whatever. And racism, number 2. What about tacit assumptions? What about just loosely held? They're not so much as a stereotype like all Russians are communists, but just tacit assumptions. Well, you know, you're always assuming. Your inability to understand from different levels. I told you earlier that the reason the billionaires are billionaires is because they can stand in the middle of the wheel and they consider and think, how is the government going to think about this? How are the owners, the shareholders going to think about this? How are the customers going to think about this? How are the employees going to think about this? How is the community, the village I live in? Try to, you know, the Indian said, walk a mile in the other person's moccasins. Well, what other person? There's 6 different people. It should have been walk a mile in everyone's moccasins. And if you can understand everybody's perceptions, then you're really going to understand how to negotiate, or how to get a mediator, how to mediate, or how to sit there and arbitrate, and hopefully you'll never have to litigate. Inability to see from another person's perspective is the number 1 framing and perceptual block. How would you like to be a hygienist in there for an hour scraping teeth, and the patient says, what do you think about here? And she's handcuffed, knowing that you'll get mad if you say, well, you're going to need either a root canal, bill and crown, or if he pulls it, you can either have a bridge or a partial or an implant, and they're in there for an hour. And you're handcuffing this person, and then you're in there for a 3-minute hygiene check, and she was supposed to seat the next patient straight up on the hour, and you're running 10 minutes to the next patient, and the whole thing's dysfunctional. It's all about self-esteem, dysfunctional stuff. Another one is value and objective blocks. The 4 value and objective blocks. Number 1 has always been, always will be, fear of taking risks. We've seen since the Greeks, people want to seek pleasure, avoid pain. You know what you've got, but you don't know what you could lose. Risk equals reward. I think that how you frame this, if you frame risk with punishment, you think you're going to be punished. My dad always told me, Howard, always study your worst case scenario. Okay, if you invest $100,000 in this and lose it all, before you do this risk, assume it's already happened. What are you going to do? Are you going to hang yourself, shoot yourself? Will your wife leave you, run off with the truck driver because he'll buy her a Happy Meal? What is your worst case scenario? If you cannot live with your worst case scenario, you shouldn't have done it. You always have a patient or two that'll come in damn near suicidal because he opened up his own business and he lost his house, he lost everything, and now he's a full-blown clinical depression. I'm sitting there laying this like, didn't you realize this was a possibility? Even if it's only 1%. It's like people who climb Mount Everest and get killed, and their wife's like an emotional vegetable over it. Didn't you ever think that when your husband decided he was going to climb Mount Everest, that one possible outcome was he'd never be back? And if it ruined your life, why didn't you stop it and let go? You have to, the way you eliminate fear of risk is you just identify what is your worst case scenario, identify it. If it's inaccessible, don't take the risk. Number 2 is settling for the status quo. Settling for the status quo is fine if you're happy in your status quo. But if you're going to sit around for 30 to 70 years old and every morning get up, I wonder what would have happened if I would have went back to night school and got my degree in engineering and went and got a job at Intel. If you're going to sit there your whole life whining, then don't accept the status quo. If you're happy with your status quo and you say, I can take it or leave it, then that's another thing. What is reality versus fantasy? Okay, we always talk about artificial yardsticks. Religions and philosophies, they always measure things by non-quantitative stuff. I don't know how much good, bad, evil, things like that, but this weighs a pound, this is 10 inches long, this is 2 inches wide. You always know, try to deal in reality. If you sit there and say, I'm going to invest in this IPO and I'm going to make a mint, well, is that reality? Is that fantasy? If it's so easy, why do you know about it? Why does no one else know about it? We talk about, you sit there and say, this guy that builds condominiums and made a mint and you're going to do that. Well, if it's so damn easy in a competitive world, why doesn't other people do it? You always see that in multi-level marketing where, they always talk about this one guy that built up a downline. He makes $10 million an hour or whatever. Well, you know how many people are underneath him making nothing? So one person makes $10 million an hour. Hell, you got to have a downline to gazillion people. So are you really aiming on a scenario where, okay, for every blue diamond in new skin, how many people make $10 a month? Okay, do the math. So you have objective, quantitative measurements of what's reality, what's fantasy, what's realistic, what is unrealistic. Like when you got married. It's for death do us part. Did you really think your wife would have a 26-inch waist 4 kids later when she's 85 years old? Didn't you realize one day she'd be laying there with a colostomy bag and breast cancer and on her last hour of life? If you can think it out to the end, why did you put a ring on your finger for the first minute? Number 4 is judgment and criticism. Apes are always worried about what other people are going to say, and that's why Omar Reed said, if you don't have an arrow in your back, you're not a pioneer, and if you're going to climb up the pole, all the monkeys in the ditch are going to be throwing gosh darn rocks at you. If you want no judgment, no criticism, don't do anything. Go to the study club and just sit there and be an idiot. But if you have an idea and you're going to try something, the apes are going to throw rocks at you because they learned this at church. They go to church and the Bible says, ye who hasn't sinned, throw the first stone. So they'll say, well, I haven't sinned. And they all go stone everybody they see, okay? It's just like they go to church and read about Mother Teresa of Calcutta working on the poor. And then they come out of the country, they come out of church, go eat breakfast at the country club. Then they go shoot all the doctors treating the poor, okay? Doing HMOs and capitation, say it's immoral and ethical. So apes are just weird. They take all the information in the world and then they rearrange it to however they want to look at it. Just like Department of Transportation. Every safety data known to man says every time you make a car more safer, people take more risk and drive faster. When you put in seat belts, four-wheel drive. How many people used to get stuck in the snow when they had two-wheel drive? Hardly anybody, because people didn't drive in the snow. They said there's 2 foot of snow. Now you give them four-wheel drive, everybody's stuck in the snow. They go, hey, I got four-wheel drive. Hell, I can drive through this goddamn blizzard. Now you got people out there freezing to death in their car because they had four-wheel drive, so they take more risks. So four-wheel drive causes you to get stuck in the snow more. They present the literature, they say, oh my gosh, we need airbags, anti-lock brakes. When you came out airbags, they take even more risk. You want to not get stuck in the snow? Get a two-wheel drive car with bald tires. You'll never drive in the snow. You want to sit there and never use your airbag? Take out your airbag, take out your seatbelt, and put a 4-inch dagger in front of your steering wheel. You'll find yourself driving with 2 feet on the brakes, occasionally putting a little gas on. Hell, you won't want to hit a flea. So remember, it's risk versus reward. You're going to get criticized. You're going to take, you got to take risk. Higher order thinking. People who think at a higher level, they show a willingness to entertain alternative perspectives. I mean, just entertain this person's perspective. Can you just get the war on drugs Nazis for a minute to sit back and think, hey, number one, what really happens to a person who quits drinking gin and tonics and smokes a joint? I know what you think. You think, well, they're going to be devil worshipping and sacrificing their kids and eating their neighbors' animals and all that kind of stuff. But it's not true. Furthermore, have you ever realized that even if this person was a narcotics addict, you know, most dentists I know that were eating, 20, 30 Vicodin a day for 5 years, you know what they did every day during those 5 years? They got up and went to work. They did root canals, bridges, fillings, and crowns. And the only reason they're in treatment is because they got caught. And now they're told they're immoral, they're bad, and they're evil, and all this stuff. We'll just stop and look at the data. For 5 years, this guy was a heroin addict. That's all Vicodin and Percodan are. It's a pharmaceutical, medical grade narcotic. But what did they do for 5 years? They were brain surgeons. They were anesthesiologists. People who are alcoholics are very functional. Now, I'm not saying you should be an alcoholic, but I'm saying that alcoholics aren't thrown in jail. So what do? They go to work every day. They pay their bills. They take care of their kids. You can be a drug addict and be functional and then try to get medical treatment to get off. And I always keep talking this because I've seen, when you're in practice management, a lot of times you're wondering why this person's asking these questions, like, why are you starting a new office? Why are you doing this? I've had more dentists lose everything because of about 70% of it's alcohol. And I'll ask them, I'll say, well, what was the point of your life where you realized you need to go to AA? And they say weird things like when they were drinking up to 2 bottles of Listerine a day in between patients, they'd get up in the morning, drink 16 ounces of vodka straight out of a bottle warm. Then they go to work and just to tide over, they're drinking Listerine. About 70% of it's alcohol, and then about 10% of it's cocaine, about 10% is prescription drugs, and 10% of it's other all kinds of things. But, you look at these people, and until they crash, sometimes for 5, 7, 10 years, they're very functional. So just try to entertain very alternative, different perspectives, okay? I mean, you believe there's a God and you think atheists are evil. Well, can you at least entertain? Right now, the communist leader of China believes that when you die, you're returned to dust. There's no other form of life. There's no God or whatever. And Americans sit there and they think this guy's evil. Well, the word evil comes from your religion, okay? Without this guy's, in his atheism, there is no good or evil. There's just, try to understand different perspectives, no matter how painful they are. Differentiated. Okay, we have open thinking. Now let's try to think about differentiated thinking. Are you able to draw increasingly finer distinctions between concepts? I mean, a little kid says you're walking. Can the little kid says walking, running? Can you increase vocabulary words until you can understand walking, jogging, running? I mean, just keep, Albert Einstein said that science is the refinement of thinking with further and further vocabulary words. Can you think integrated? Are you able to weave differences into an increasingly complex whole, a systems view rather than an ethnocentric and fragmented view? Developing constructive thinking skills. The people who can't think, they're always giving answers. The people who can think ask questions. Go from answers where you're a know-it-all, well, people say, oh, well, you're a know-it-all, you think you know everything, to questions. When someone says something to you and you think they're wrong, ask more questions. Go from analysis to synthesis. Go from arguing and defending your turf to exploring this new realm. I thought the most fascinating thing that ever happened to me was when I left home in this very Catholicism, Roman Catholic deal where we went to church every day. We said the rosary every night. We always did first Saturdays, first Fridays, this whole view. And the neatest thing for me was actually getting out of there and going to college and meeting a non-Catholic. It was like, you mean you're not Catholic? Who are you? And then it even went further when you went to Kansas City and you were living 3 blocks from dental school. I mean, it was like 80% African American. It was like 20% Vietnamese and Asian. There's a huge gay community in downtown Kansas City because you couldn't grow up gay in North and South Dakota or in Iowa or Kansas. They'd lynch you. So, I mean, I was living with African Americans, Asians, homosexuals. It was very fun going to the African Americans at church right across the street from our house. I'm talking to gay people and asking them, what was it like growing up gay? When did you know you're gay? Why did you move to Kansas City? What do your parents think? You know, just explore. Don't argue and defend that you should be a heterosexual Catholic in dental school. Try to explore what it's like. Instead of relying on method, well, that's the way it's always been done. That's why I don't even like hiring people with dental experience. You hire someone with 10 years dental experience, they always say to you, every time someone tells you, well, that's not the way Dr. Numbnuts did it. I worked till Dr. Numbnuts until he hung himself, and he always did it this way. And I don't know why. I've never seen it done this way. I mean, try to sit there and go from method to a challenge. Why do math teachers give their students, they say, well, here, do 5 math problems. Well, hell, who wants a problem? I mean, why don't they say, hey, we're going to play a game. And on this game today, I'm going to give you a new, you know, like on checkers, you know, you can just go forward and you can only do a couple things. Well, let's get rid of the checkers and let's go to chess. On chess, the pieces do different things. A pawn can only go forward, but a queen can go all the way to the down diagonally. A horse can go 1 up, 2 over left or right, or 2 up and 1 over left or right. Well, here's a new math game, and here's a neat little thing, and let's play some math games. Let's see if anybody can play this and solve this little puzzle. Okay, so, you know, you ask for a challenge. Quit reducing everything until what you can understand, where someone says something, say, well, I don't know all that shit, but I know this. I know one little fragment, I'll reduce it to this, to expanding. It's like instead of being a dentist where you're a molar mechanic, I do teeth and gums. And, you know, it's kind of like when we did charity dentistry. It's kind of funny watching dentists with tunnel vision. You know, we're sitting there, we got 4 dentists, and we got this 5,000 Indians on dirt floor, no running water, and they come in there and we're looking in their mouth, fixing their teeth. After about 3 or 4 hours, I'm looking at this guy wondering, why the hell is he fixing her tooth? Her foot's swollen up to the size of a football. And I say, why are you pulling a tooth? Look at her damn foot. Well, I mean, I'm a dentist. I just do teeth. I don't know what to do with foot. I said, God, we're the only people in the village that can read. No one here can read. I mean, they go, yeah, we're not a doctor. A doctor? What's a doctor in a village where no one has everybody's dirt floors? Put this girl up on the table. Took a tennis shoe, she had a piece of barbed wire stuck in her foot, pulled it out, pus came out, took a tennis shoe, filled it up with Paradex, put it on her foot. Before we left 4 days later, hell, she was walking. So instead of separating everything, try to be more holistic. Now look how the dentist freaked out in Arizona when this dentist had no complaints from patients and it was, you know, he didn't like mercury. Look at Hal Huggins. The smartest anti-mercury guy in dentistry. He's already had a license away. They just did it again in Arizona. I don't really know the story. I don't see all the details, but I know this. I think they're standard deviation 3. I mean, these guys are out on a limb, but let them try something new. For all you know, they might try something new. 10 years later, we're all doing it. But if you kill anybody who goes outside the herd, we're never going to go anywhere. Let these people go holistic. See what they come up with. Quit being judgmental. Why is everything right or wrong, heaven or hell? If you do that, they'll vomit you out of the mouth and you'll send into Gehenna, a burning pit of sulfur. Quit being judgmental. Be accepting. You know, Hinduism, you know, there's a hell of a lot more Hindus than there are Baptists. There's a hell of a lot more Confucius than there are Methodists. There's a hell of a lot more other religions. Be accepting. Be tolerant. You don't want someone coming into your house and taking away your right to have a dog, so don't go into their house and take away their right to have a cat. If you don't want people to come steal your personal liberties, then quit trying to always take away other people's personal liberties. Leave everybody alone and Earth's going to be a rock and roll party. Quit trying to go from controlling everything to self-organizing everything. Instead of saying, well, no one will do anything, I'm in control, to just say, well, go out and do everything. I'm just going to try to keep you organized. I'll be in charge of the organizational structure, so we're following our mission statement, and I will let control go. Go from being objective to intuitive. Intuitive feelings plus facts. You know, the objective people, they get all angular intent on facts. Remember, Benjamin Franklin said, there's lies. Then he said a worse lie than that is telling half the truth. And the reason that's a worse lie is because by telling half the truth, now people are forced to believe your lie. When you just lie, people don't believe you most of the time. But if you tell half the truth, they might accept your lie. But he said the worst lies were statistics. Those are facts. Grow from being objective, fact-based, to taking facts with common sense. Remember Mark Twain said, common sense ain't so common? Okay? Mix the facts of what's coming in with a little bit of objective, intuitive. Go from many options. Well, here's our 3 options. To many perspectives. Well, here's how 6 different people might look at this. You know, the government might come in and say this. I think our employees will come in and say this. I think the owners of capital are going to say this. I think our customers are going to say this. I think the village we live in is going to say this. You know, let's stand in the middle. What would be the best, knowing that all the different stakeholder perspectives? Go from knowing everything to try to understand everything. How do we think? We think with our hardware. Our brain, as Tony would always say, is that, you know, humans are born with a brain without an operating manual. And you know, when a mother duck gives birth to a baby duck, the baby duck is born, comes out of an egg with its brain, its hardware, but it comes loaded with software. The baby walks right down in the pond and swims. The mother duck talks to the baby duck, it talks back. Most other mammals need their moms. Most organisms, 90% of all life forms on the species, do not need their parents for a split second. I mean, you're a blade of grass. You're an oak tree. You're a virus. You're a bacteria. When you see a tomato plant come up in your garden, you see it asking the other plant, which way do I grow? Most organisms their hardware comes installed with software. They just execute life, okay? As you get to monkeys, 187 species of monkeys, they need mom for 9 years. As you get to the 4 great apes other than humans, gorillas, chimpanzees, orangutans, and gibbons, they need mom for 13 years. I think it's safe to say that humans are pretty much incompetent until they're 21 years old. So your brain is built for efficiency, but it doesn't have software. Your brain has capacity. Your brain is built for efficiency. It's got a lot of capacity for many forms of intelligence. It's got a hell of a lot of memory built in our mindset. And its perception, your brain comes with no objective reality. It's just, how do I perceive my world? Now, you got to take that operating system brain, built for efficiency, capacity of many intelligence, memory, and no objective reality, and you got to understand that your software is going to be loaded. In fact, I think the best thing out there now is these camcorders, because children really have no long-term memory of what happened or what was said to them or anything that happened from birth to 6. We know that. Sigmund Freud identified that. Herman Rorschach identified that. Any hardcore Abraham Maslow psychologist will tell you people are out there, we talked about earlier. Why do you search to the end of the world how to do a better root canal and you won't face your own accounting? Because you don't remember when you're 4 years old, your mom and dad were fighting about money, okay? And this is in your unconscious, you're not aware of it, so you don't face the dragon. Well, now these camcorders are going to be great because there's going to be a lot of people. I can see it 30, 40 years from now, psychiatrists or psychologists listening to this messed up kid and saying, will you call your mom and see if she's got a lot of those VCR movies? Maybe if I watch 30, 40 hours of these movies from birth to 6, I might find out what was being screamed and yelled in the background. What words were they choosing? What were they saying? What events were you at? What was your mom load into your head before you even aware of to filter it? Okay? Software is dualistic. It's authority-driven. It's subjective. It's experience-driven. It's procedural. It's method-driven. It's constructed. It's improvisation-driven. So your new operating system needs to be a mindset shift. It needs to recognize perceptions and allow provocation. I just love it when I'm saying something in a seminar and someone gets up and storms out and writes me a 3-page letter. I'm like, what a frickin' idiot! 300 people are laughing at a joke, and this guy storms out, and what's funny is his receptionist, and they're laughing her head off, and he's like dragging her, and he's mad at her, and she's like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm laughing. And then he's telling all of his 4 laughing staff, quit laughing at him, get up, we're going to walk out right now. This guy is an asshole. And, and they're like, oh, okay, so they all get up and leave. Allow yourself to be provoked, okay? Conversation choice is skillful discussion and dialogue. Attitudes necessary for higher order thinking are You got to wonder, respect, and be curious. You need to wonder. I need new information to thrive and grow. I must seek to understand the whole. I find joy in uncertainty and freedom in ambiguity. You got to have respect. I respect other models of the world and seek to understand that perspective. I am doing my best to understand the situation. It is likely others are as well. I try to understand other views, not insist on mine. And then you got the California Dental Association. These guys don't have enough intellectual gray matter to allow me to speak one time at the CDA in San Fran or Anaheim. These guys are intellectual zeros. Come on, think about that. And then you got to be curious. My models of the world are only my models. There is much to learn. I never have a full answer. So wonder, respect, be curious. This is higher order thinking. Remember, everything we knew the year 1900 in medicine and dentistry was extinct before 1920. In fact, one of the neatest presents I ever got, at Christmas, it's socks, underwear, ties, you're trying to act, like surprise, whatever. And my wife gave me this little package, kind of heavy, and I'm like, what the hell is this? And I opened it up. She had ran an ad in somewhere, wherever, JAD or whatever, and she had found the first three books ever written by G.B. Black, the father of modern dentistry, paid $1 gazillion for them. One was like 1898, one was like 1902, 1906. They were even autographed and signed by him. I'm like, wow, here's the father of modern dentistry. I stayed up for the first night. In fact, I just stayed up. It was unbelievable. I'm reading this stuff. My God. Here's the father of modern dentistry. There's about 5 or 6 things he said that still apply. So remember, as anally retentive as you are, as much as you think you're right, everything that we're talking about is probably going to be extinct in 50, 60 years. So give it up. Wonder. Be curious. Respect. This is the year 2000, we have still not even made contact with anyone else out in the universe. There are people who believe there's no life in our space. You're in the Milky Way with 200 billion stars. We know from Hubble Space Telescope that there's about 1 billion other galaxies, and the average galaxy has 1 billion stars. So if there's 1 billion other galaxies, each one having 1 billion stars, that's 1 times 10 to the 38. And then the only planet you've ever set foot on has 100 million life forms. So the only planet you've been on has 100 million life forms, and there's one with 38 star systems out there, and you say we're the only form of life? First of all, that is statistically impossible. You show me a statistical model that says you could have 100 million life forms on one ball of dirt, and it never happens again with one with 38 zeros after it. I mean, it's a wonder how anal people are. You want to go to listening. Characteristics. Okay, listening. Are you going to debate, discuss, or have dialogue? When we're listening, are you listening so that you can debate and to attack and defeat and be impatient? Or are you being a little higher order and you're trying to listen so you can discuss, only to persuade and respond or to articulate options? Or are you listening so you can have dialogue, so you can seek to understand with no resistance? When you're judgment, are you judgmental so that you can be in a debate, so that you're right or wrong with certainty? Or are you judging so that you can sit there to discussion, better or worse, choice, must limit? Or are you judgmental to seek dialogue so you can suspend judgment and wonder with uncertainty? When you agree, is it an agreement in debate, telling, give speeches, no inquiry? Or are you in agreement with discussion so that you can sell or rely on method? Or are you in agreement with dialogue so that you are asking, so your advocacy, so that advocacy, asking, inquiry, you don't want to debate. Let's move it up to discussion so that one day you can seek dialogue, so you can seek to understand and suspend judgment, have wonder, uncertainty, asking. That's what it's all about. Conversation choices. When your agreement, is it to win, lose, competitive, forced, or is it discussion agreement where you're seeks, compromise, you're analytical, or are we up to the higher order thinking dialogue where agreement's unnecessary? We don't even have to agree. We can agree to disagree. I just want to understand your perspective. When we focus, are we focusing on debate to attack and the weight of the evidence and these are the facts? Are we focusing on discussion where we're trying to change others' views with efficiency? Are we focusing on higher order dialogue to draw out and learn where no change or agreement is necessary? When we're dealing with thinking, is our process in debate where we're defending our own position on a single issue, where everything's polar, everything's black or white? Or is our process up into discussion where we air out all the opinions and we try to choose? Or are you in higher order process dialogue thinking where you explore assumptions, maintain whole, create? Knowledge is created and shared through conversation. If you can't sit down, why does every child rebel? Because mom and dad are dialogue, force feed, this is how it is. Man, when you're 40 years old and you run your 18-year-old out of the house, I mean, come on, that would never happen if your 18-year-old would leave home and live with grandma and grandpa. Grandma and grandpa wouldn't force all these issues. If you do that, you're out of my house. Look at abortions. You got the religious right going all psycho about all this abortions and it's all bad. Well, who's getting the abortions? The religious right's children, because they're so afraid to go home and tell their mom they're pregnant, and her mom will find out in 1 minute that she's not a virgin and she's pregnant. The little Christian girl is so scared she gets the abortion. When you go to the lower income community, my God, she sits there and when she goes and sits there and tells her mom, Mom, I'm pregnant, I'm 16, I'm not a virgin, I'm pregnant. Mom sits there and says, well, so is I, it's okay, stay home. You are more likely, as a function of how dogmatically religious and anti-abortion your parents are, is the number one determinant on how many abortions your own children have. If you want to get rid of abortions, quit creating such a hateful environment of shooting abortion doctors and freaking out your children that your own children are the ones getting all the abortions. If you sit there and say, well, this isn't the decision I would want you to do. I hope you're a virgin when you get married. I hope that doesn't do this. But if you do, I hope you would wear a condom. You know, the more religious you are, the more sex ed you'll never even have. So, I mean, think about this. Grow to learn. What are values and objectives in decision making? Values are things that matter to you and are the reason for making decisions in the first place. What are your objectives? Objectives are specific things you want to do, and taken together make up a person's values. No model of the decision situation can be built without knowing what the decision problem is at hand. Not identifying the exact decision is called error of the third kind. You're sitting here debating something, and we don't even know what the decision is at hand. What are consequences? Your consequences happens after the last decision has been made and the last uncertain event has been resolved. Fundamental objectives, structured in a hierarchy, are those things the decision maker wants to accomplish, and the means objectives, restructured in a network, describe ways to accomplish the fundamental objective. So your fundamental objective is what you're trying to achieve. Your means objectives is what you're doing to get to your fundamental objective. Are you working just to fix teeth? Are you working to make a living so you can have a house, a wife, a spouse, and a kids? Do the ends justify the means? What is the WIT test? W-I-T-T. Why is that important? WIT distinguishes whether your objective is a means or a fundamental objective. The decision context should include number one, include the broadest strategic context possible to ensure all appropriate but no superfluous objectives. And make sure you have defined the decision ownership, that you have feasibility necessary in both time and resources. What is the clarity test? The process of reviewing all decision elements within a model to assure that each has an absolutely clear definition with universal understanding. This is necessary so that all individuals involved in a decision are reviewing the events and applying the variables in the same manner. Another way to look at the clarity test failing is that you do a test, you get back the data, and they're not sure if the test was yes or no. So they did a test without enough clarity to determine what are we even looking for that knows if it's right or wrong, plus or minus, turn left or right. What's the difference in a good decision and a lucky outcome? Good decisions are well-informed choices considering all available data for all aspects of the problem, whereas a lucky outcome may occur despite the approach, but it is far less likely to reoccur and is very inconsistent. Decision analysis can help by assisting you and developing a thorough and comprehensive view of the problem. The clarity test is the process of reviewing all decision elements within a model to assure that each has an absolutely clear definition with a universal understanding. This is necessary so that all individuals involved in a decision are viewing the events and applying the variables in the same clear manner. So in review, what are the 4 phases of creativity? Preparation, incubation, illumination, verification. What are the 4 blocks to creativity of framing and perception? Stereotyping, tacit assumptions, inability to understand problems at different levels, inability to understand problems from another perspective. The 4 blocks of values: fear of taking a risk, accepting the status quo, reality versus fantasy, judgment and criticism. What are the 3 blocks of social, culture, and environmental? Taboos, strengths of traditions, reason and logic versus humor, fantasy and art. I have that's my biggest problem in lecturing, is I'll say something I think is funnier than hell, and I'll deliver in a very artistic way, and old Dr. Numbnuts can't handle it at all. You know, he's like, I have never been to a dental seminar where someone said monkey fart, and I was very offended. You know, kill yourself. It'd just be so simple. I'm sure your wife would love it. What are creativity techniques? 3 things needed for creativity organization, according to Teresa Amable, is number 1, expertise in domain and good at what they're doing. Have skill in creative thinking. Intrinsic motivation, has fun doing it. If you can be an expert in your domain, have skill in creative thinking, and be internally motivated by having fun doing it, you can probably come up with creative techniques. What are other creative techniques? Be fluent and flexible in your thinking. Have an idea checklist. Use brainstorming with no evaluation. And you know, when you go into a doctor's office and you're back in the break room and say, does anybody have any ideas? And the staff member will say, well, I think we ought to do that. No, that would never work. Or another receptionist will say something, she goes, oh, if that worked, everyone would do it. Use brainstorming with no evaluation. And save all your evaluation. Another way to do brainstorming, you got a bunch of introvert geeks, is have everybody write down their ideas so they have no idea what everybody's saying, and then turn off the paper and everybody read what they wrote. And what you'll find is that half your staff will say, well, you'll see them start erasing or crossing off. No, no, no. In fact, what I make them do is just turn them in. Okay, everybody write down what they do, turn them in, and then say out loud what you were thinking. And try to do metaphorical thinking. Analogies, personalities, fantasies. And the best way to do brainstorming is say, look, we're going to get the account receivables down to less than 1 month of production, and we are going to have the over 90, total account receivables will be less than 1 month production, and only 15% is allowed under 90, and we're in the break room, and you staff have 10 minutes to give me 10 ideas of how to do it. And if they only, well, let's send out the statements again, let's start doing this. And then if they can only get 7 or 8, say, come on, think of anything. And they're like, well, I don't know. Why don't you say we'll have Obi-Wan Kenobi come in? That's an idea. Just let loose. I don't care if it's a fantasy. Say we're going to have Mel Gibson coming here butt naked wearing a bow tie, and he's going to sit on your lap and do the same. Just get a bunch of things up there. The faster you go, the more fluent you go, the no evaluation, you'll get more creative ideas to fly out. What are biases and scrutiny? Heuristics and biases. Representativeness, availability, how you anchor and adjust. Do you think that just as someone's gay, that he'll be a waiter or a flight attendant? Maybe he's a boxer. You know how many professional athletes in the NBA, big old male linemen, big old people, quit anchoring to these things. Get motivational biases out, okay? What is the protocol for expert assessment that satisfies personal scrutiny? Get background, identification and recruitment of experts, motivate the experts, structuring and decomposition of what are they actually saying, probability assessment training, aggregation of experts in a probability distribution. Well, okay, you're doing an implant. Are you going to do an implant with a ball and O-ring, or you connect implants with a bar? Well, Gordon says you can put an implant with a ball and O-ring. Stereo says you can do it. Well, Carl Misch doesn't like it. So you start aggregating. What is the distribution and the aggregation? What is the distribution of experts? How do they fall out? The truth's somewhere in the middle. What are 3 framing and perceptual blocks? Inability to see from another person's perspective is number 1. Stereotype is number 2. Task assumption is 3. Try to get rid of these. Catch yourself when you're doing it. And please don't hand these down to your kids. Don't be driving around town and seeing some homeless guy and say, look at that lazy bastard. For all you know, you can stop your car and get out, and this guy is going to sit there and he thinks he's the Queen of Sheba. He needs mental education. He's dysfunctional. I mean, tell your kids, well, he could be a lazy lord-ass Democrat, or he could be mental health. Maybe he needs to be in charter hospital. You know, show them all the different perspectives. Not everyone who's a Democrat is actually lazy and stupid. Just because 99% are doesn't mean that 1% isn't. So inability to see from another person's perspective would be an inner city Democrat with sympathy towards people stuck in a generational cycle of poverty and bad habits, not understanding the views of a supply-side economist who would want to cut spending programs to force a change. It's like trying to get a doctor to charge out pay to play. Go to McDonald's, hamburger, give me $2. You order, you pay, you get your hamburger. I mean, I've been yelling that in dentistry for 10 years, and people just still don't get it. They're like, well, no, we take the order, we give them the root canal, then we beg for money, and Howard, our problem is we have 2 months of production in our over 90 account receivables. Get rid of stereotyping. This is hateful stuff. Stereotyping, prejudice comes from the word prejudging. To prejudge a problem based on an overgeneralization, such as anyone with an earring and long hair must be a hippie, okay? Watch what you say. Same thing with amalgams. As you stand up there on your little lecture circuit and scream how amalgams are immoral, unethical, I ask you this. 7 out of every 10 babies on the planet last year were born on a dirt floor. What is a more safety hazard? A silver filling in a tooth so it doesn't rot so they can eat in a child who was born on a dirt floor? Or gosh, do you think you're really going to go do a Targus Vectris inlay in the third world? Quit overgeneralizing. Think in market segmentation. What a tacit assumption is assume there are limits to solving the problem, such as connecting the 9 dots. Many assume you can't go out of the 9 dots boundaries. See, when you sit down, remember they do that, they have a grid, they have 9 dots, and they say, how can you connect these 9 dots with X number of lines? And people say it can't be done because they just assumed you couldn't go outside the line. I love this one in toothpicks. What you do is you take 2 toothpicks. You take 6 toothpicks, and you make a triangle with the toothpicks. And you have a triangle made of 3 toothpicks. One, thumb be another one. You have 3 toothpicks, and you lay them next to each other. And you say, by only moving 1 toothpick on these 2 triangles, how can you make 4 triangles? And they just sit there forever, and what you do is you take one of the toothpicks and you move it so it looks like a 4. And so it's basically 4 triangles. I mean, tacit assumptions are assuming you can't go out of these boundaries. Same thing in amalgam updates. Raymond Bertolotti is the one that straightened me out on this mercury toxicity debate when he started talking about all the free ethyl methyl mercury floating in the ocean, and how every anti-amalgamist that he's ever talked to is sitting there eating a bowl of popcorn shrimp, eating steak and lobster and shrimp and clams, and these people don't even know what they're talking about. Value-based blocks, we talked about our fear of taking risks, the status quo, reality versus fantasy, judgment versus criticism. You know, do you really think Mercury, I mean, how much of this debate is a reality? How much of it is a fantasy? Fear of taking a risk is inherently against the nature of many people. They have an aversion to risk. Are you a risk-averse person? This limits their decision-making ability. Don't fearfully fall forward. Flippantly fly freely. I mean, look at gosh darn Rush Limbaugh and Howard Stern. These guys are pioneers because these were the first people to take to the air that, you know, Rush Limbaugh was saying everything your dad and uncle were talking about on the fishing boat, but everybody thought you couldn't talk about this in public. Look at Howard Stern. Howard Stern's the first guy who said, you know what, you could go on a public airway and say jokes that at least 2/3 of Americans think are funny. I mean, you ever notice you go to the workforce, everybody's telling all these jokes, but then you get together in a big meeting, you stand up, you say the same damn joke, and everybody's like, oh, I can't believe he said that. But if everybody one by one's on a fishing boat, probably 90% would think it's funnier than hell. What is the status quo bias? Many people prefer things to be the way they are. Change is stressful, and to keep things the way they are is more preferable and thus limits their decision-making ability. What's reality versus fantasy? Many people are afraid and embarrassed to think of acting out, far out, unimaginable ideas, and fear other people's judgments and criticism or being made fun of it. That's why I can do stand-up comedy, because, I mean, the first couple of times, people are just looking at you like, is this guy for real? And you do it enough times, and you finally get it down, and the people who can go out there and achieve all that they can be, actualize their self-potential, are the people that aren't afraid to try. And just try and do it. Forget judgment and criticism. I know I'm socially retarded, but you could be that too. Embarrassment and fear of other people's judgments and criticism of one's thoughts or action is just absolutely peasant thinking. I mean, half the people that you're worried about what they think, I'm looking at these people like, I wouldn't care if they flush a toilet and just sucked them down and I never saw them again. I mean, why do you worry about what losers think, okay? Two creative enhancing techniques are mainly to be fluent and flexible in your thinking, so you can go fluent. Fluent means fast. I mean, if I say, Nick, give me 3 good reasons I should do this, and they have 1, and that's their turf, they're defending. I mean, give me 2 more, give me 3 more. I mean, when someone says, what are options? If your staff can't give you 10 options in 10 minutes of what to do, then somebody is stifling creativity. They're afraid they're going to give you the wrong answer. They're afraid you're going to embarrass them, or they're going to look stupid. Build a healthy organizational environment where people aren't afraid to say things that they might think are crazy. A fluent thinker can think of many ideas very quickly, almost like an idea digging a deep, deep hole, whereas flexible thinker can think of many different solutions from a broad perspective, like digging many different shallow holes. Idea checklist would be like the D3 question first given in the book to ask as an idea checklist to help a new perspective on the decision at hand, or even make an idea strategy tree to help see the decision from many different perspectives. The implications of how heuristics and biases can impact the assessment of probabilities. Availability of previous experience and prior knowledge of past experience is a big thing in our brain that affects our decision making. And we anchor to those things. Well, I remember when I was a little kid, we went fishing and it was bad. Or I remember when we were a little kid, we did that and it was real fun, okay? Motivational biases, such as a salesperson setting a low goal, so when they break it can look better. You know, watch out with the how you set up goals. You know, don't set up things to where people have a low hurdle with a big reward. Decomposition is very important. Decomposition is breaking the problem down into components, so each part of the problem can be analyzed in and of itself. Then you can see if each composition is a fundamental objective that is important in and of itself, or a means objective that is important more in getting to a more important fundamental objective. This helps quantify the decision context. The steps in the process of obtaining expert risk assessment of the decision-making process is a big help. Number 1, decomposition of the problem is very important. Break it into its component parts. And then number 2, assessment of experts in the field. What do the experts say about this? Then number 3, what is the motivation of the experts? Do they have stock in this company? Are they getting paid at the back of the room? The experts training in risk assessment, decision making. What is the probability assessment of verification? What is the probability assessment of experts in the field? I mean, do they look like a shotgun splatter, or is there kind of a distribution? Or 68.5% of the experts in the field say this one choice? Maybe we should go there. Culture is your acquired knowledge, beliefs, and customs that we have taken from society. Cultural beliefs and values are widely held beliefs about what is desirable. Just because everybody believes this is desirable, for all you know, might be the number 1 source of stress in your life. Norms are unwritten rules based upon what we think is correct in our culture that specify or prohibit certain behaviors in specific situations. Like, for instance, can you say a dirty word on the radio? Everybody said no. Gosh, and Howard Stern did it. He's a gazillionaire. Is it incorrect behavior that can result in sanctions? Do you think I give a rat's ass that the ADA won't let me speak at their annual meetings anymore, or that JETA won't print me anymore, or that CDA doesn't have enough intellectual gray matter to tolerate diversity? Why don't you ask the president of the California Dental Association, who's ever in charge of the speakers at Hinman, name a successful species that eats their young. These guys are just intellectual zeros. Don't be afraid of sanctions. Anyway, it's a mild disapproval. They can't banish you. Hell, I already turned down invitations all day long. And you know, when I first started speaking in 19 whenever, my honorarium's $1,500. Every time I got to where I was saturated, where every Friday was taken, and they're saying, can you speak this Friday? I'd say, well, why am I saying no to you and charging everybody $1,500? So every year I raise $1,000. So what happens? I mean, now it's up to $6,500, and the CDA will still won't have me. I mean, these guys don't even get it. When you draw out a decision, what are these little triangles and circles things that you see? Okay, nodes are decision, chance, and calculation, consequence, value nodes. Arrows into chance and consequent nodes represent relevance. Arrows into decision nodes represent sequence. A value node represents a mathematical calculation or a constant value, whereas a chance node represents uncertain events or values by outlining possible states or outcomes and their respective probabilities. They look like this. Draw these out. This is how they do it in MBA school. If you got a decision at hand, the decision is a square. If it's not a requisite decision where decide you're going to say, well, I'm getting married in 6 weeks. I want an outdoor wedding. Okay, well, is it going to rain or is it going to be sunny? I don't know. It's not for 6 weeks. A weatherman's like an economist. You'll never be able to quantify chaos theory, okay? Weathermen have a lot of models, but physics tells you the universe is ran by chaos. I mean, hell, look at the Big Bang. So these are chance nodes. It's not a requisite decision, so you got to sit there and identify what are your chances. And if it rains, what's the probability? What will you do? If it doesn't rain, you'll go outside. What will you do? But you got to think this out. It's a risky decision. And then the final one, the rounded edges, some people use a triangle. Those are the calculation or constant value consequences. An influence diagram provides compact representation of decision problems while suppressing many of the details. They are ideal for obtaining overviews, especially for complex problems, and are easily understood for people of little technical background. They are superior graphical representations most useful for communication. So there it is. You got a square, there's your decision, and you have chance, and what's going to be the consequence. Nodes are connected in a diagram by arrows or arcs. We call a node at the beginning of an arc a predecessor, a node at the end of the arc a successor. And that was your basic risky decision. Value nodes and chance nodes. Where's another one? An influence diagram is a superior graphical representation most useful for structuring and communication, whereas a decision tree has a lot more information, can be messy, large in size, displays a lot of details, appropriate for analyzing values and probability inputs. They're rarely used separately. They complement each other well during various phases of decision modeling, and depending, are you showing this to the staff with an influence diagram, or are you showing this to the banker, your accountant, or your lawyer with a decision tree? Okay? There's imperfect information. This diagram reflects to possibility of obtaining imperfect information about some uncertain event that will affect the ultimate consequences. You utilize imperfect information in law of decision making. You're using forecasts, whether it's from a weatherman or economist, or stocks going up or down. Should you refinance your house? Where are interest rates going? There, you have forecasts, there are imperfect information, you have chance, and you got to make a decision today. But just lay it all out and see what it looks like. Decision trees show minute details, more information, they're more messy, they're more complicated. The requirements of a decision tree are the options represented from a decision node must be that the decision maker can only choose one option. Each chance node must have branches that are mutually exclusive and collectively exhaustive. It's either or, it can't be both. must have all the possible paths. These are the only things that can happen. It's like the guy who opened up his own restaurant and lost his house a year later and is suicidal. You must have all possible outcomes. Didn't you know this could happen? The decision and chance nodes appear in chronological order. You have intermediate calculation nodes. Sometimes a decision is an undoing thing, where if you sit there and say, well, we're going to do this, but if halfway this happens, we may do this. Here's what decision trees looks like. I actually have software. This is made on my software. I learned this from Professor Diane Walker at Arizona State University. She's a sharp woman. She taught me QBA, quantitative business analysis, 502. But you have a decision. You know, you're going to have surgery. Well, don't have surgery. What could happen? Progressive debilitation. Let's say you do have surgery. You could recover fully, live a long, healthy life. Hell, you may have complications. What happens if you have complications? You may have full recovery, have a long, healthy life. You may have partial recovery, be invalid after difficult treatment. You may die during the surgery. Or number three, you may die after the surgery. These are all complications. This is how decision makers think. What is your strategy? When applying strategy to analyze decision trees, a particular immediate alternative as well as specific alternatives in future decisions. And then also lay them out in risk profiles. What's the risk this will happen versus, is it a 1% chance I might die during the surgery, or is it a 50% chance? Would you really have a boo job if 9 out of 10 women that had it died? What is your risk profile? Risk profile displays relative risk levels of alternatives. They're tedious for large number of strategies, but they're choice optimal strategy, and they make everything more subjective. What is your EMV? Calculation is straightforward and masks the variance of possible outcomes, is not a perfect indicator of possible outcomes, but a weighted average. Requires education on the method of calculation. And then you can do cumulative risk files, where which risk profile has dominance, displays a dominant strategy within ranges of outcomes. Which one gives a more comprehensive view of outcomes and displays a dominant choice? Like if this is how you lay it out, a cumulative risk profile is the addition or accumulation of the chances of individual payoffs on the risk profile for the specified strategy. The vertical axis is the chance that the payoff is less than or equal to the corresponding value. So if you lay out your outcomes, and these are your outcomes, it starts making quantitative sense. I know this is very hard for me to lay all this out, where you're taking qualitative, the art of decision making, and trying to make the whole thing quantitative, but it gives structure and guidance to how you do it. Here's what a cumulative risk profile can look like. You can say, okay, first of all, there's no chance that the settlement will be less than zero. Okay, if I sue this guy, there's a 24% chance that the settlement will be greater than or equal to zero, but less than $5 billion. You might say, but there's an 83% chance that the settlement will be less than $10 billion. There's a 100% chance that the settlement will be greater than $10 billion. You know, what is the chance of fighting this thing? Risk profiles will give you a strategy as a particular immediate alternative as well as a specific alternative in future decisions. Risk profiles display relative risk levels of alternative. They're tedious for large numbers of strategies, but they lay them all out. This calculation is straightforward. It masks the variance of possible outcomes. It's not a perfective indicator, but it does add creativity. It makes you look for new alternatives within elements. What's a sensitivity analysis? Sensitivity analysis answers what it is that matters and what part matters more than others. Is it a two-way sensitivity analysis, where a graphical technique for studying the joint impact of changes in two of the most critical values? So, just what I'm trying to say here is that, we'll end on this one. You have an expected monetary value. You are going to make a decision at hand. You have a 40% chance that if you invest in this stock, it'll be worth $1,000. You have a 60% chance it'll be worth $500. All I'm trying to do is tell you that when you lay out the decision in a box, you lay the chance out in a circle, you put a probability on what could happen out of this chance circle, and then you end with your triangle. Honey bunny, if we do okay, we got to make a decision what we're going to do. And here's a little circle. We don't know everything that could happen, but it's a 10% chance that this could happen, and the triangle is this. It's a 20% chance that can happen, and this. And it's a 70% chance, and this will be our triangle outcome. But when you lay it out like that, your honey bunny might turn over and say, well, Howard, did you ever realize it's a 1% chance this would happen? So, and it's a 1% this could happen. And this is a graphic deal. This is what I do all the time in the break room. We got this we got this huge little, those little white grease boards. And I will sit there and I'll say, staff, here's a square. Here's the decision we're trying to make. And I think these are our two possible outcomes. And I'll lay this out there. And a staff member come out here and say, well, hell, forget that. Do you realize this could happen? And the assistant will walk up there and say, do you know if this can happen? This is how they do it in boardrooms. This is the common language in Fortune 500 boardrooms. This is how they lay out influence diagrams, decision strategies, and then after they diagrammatically have outlaid all the possible options, everybody sits around and they try to put the probabilities, and then when it's all done, they say, well, if we do this, we got a 40% chance of making 1,000. If we do this, it's about a 60% chance of getting 500. And if we do this, it's a 10% chance we'll get 800 based on everything that we know. We've taken everybody's qualitative insights. We've got everybody's output. I think our decision at hand here today is well diagrammed. It's well laid out quantitatively. Is this what we think the decision is? Everybody take out a sheet of paper. Do not talk to anybody else. Which decision would you pick? And if you have really laid it out well, it's absolutely amazing. You'll cross this out here. You'll come out, put 2 strikes, and say everyone's decided. If we make this decision, we got a guaranteed chance of turning this $100 into $800. And nobody wanted to take a 40% chance of going with 1,000 when they knew it'd be a 60% chance they went for 500. Everybody decided $800 is a sure thing. Let's go this route here. And when you do this, everybody's on board. Everybody understands. Everybody knows why they did what they did. And then what's the neatest thing? You save these. I use this on computer software program. I like to save them because guess what? This chance today, well, down the road, whatever we didn't know what would happen is going to happen. Then what we have in our office a year later will say, oh, look, you guys realize we would have got $1,000. And everybody's like, wow. And everybody goes back, and this is the schematic, quantitative way to make a qualitative decision. And then later down, you have your feedback, so you can start saying to yourself, am I a high-quality decision maker? Do I have structure to decision making? Or do I just randomly throw grenades and make lucky outcomes? Thanks for another day, and I'll see you tomorrow.